Good evening and watching the news at 7:30 on ATV, I'm Edna Tse.
And I'm Emily Siu. Here's a look at tonight's top stories.
Leung rules out a deal with Pan-Democrats to scrap all indirectly elected LegCo seats by 2020.
Central banker Raymond Yeung warns home buyers to watch out for a possible interest rate rise this year.
Fake local university exposed after offering cheap degrees and certificates for sale online. Chief Executive Raymond Yeung has rejected the possibility of a deal with the Pan-Democrats to scrap functional constituency seats in the 2020 LegCo elections in return for their support for his final political reform package.
Yeung said he can't make such a promise for 2020 and insisted the opposition camp will have to follow the restrictions Beijing has already set.
Over the past week, the Civic Party's Ronnie Tong and IT sector lawmaker Charles Mok have got the town buzzing about the possibility that all 27 Pan-Democrats in LegCo may not end up united in vetoing the government's electoral blueprint for the 2017 chief executive election. Tong said he's willing to persuade his voters and his Pan-Democrat colleagues to pocket an electoral blueprint set under Beijing's restrictive framework if the government promises to abolish all functional constituencies for the 2020 LegCo polls. But Chief Executive Raymond Yeung was quick to shoot down the idea this afternoon. Yeung said cancelling all the mostly trade-based seats in LegCo is not something the current administration can promise. He then repeated his official line that the government is willing to listen to all proposals as long as they adhere to the basic law and decisions made by the National People's Congress Standing Committee. What's being debated now is whether Tong's idea is or is not a deviation from that framework. Influential Beijing loyalist Elsie Leung echoed the chief executive in an article published today, slamming Tong's idea as impractical. The Basic Law Committee vice chairwoman said demanding such a commitment from Beijing is tantamount to rejecting the ruling made by China's top legislature on how much democracy Hong Kong can have. In LegCo this morning, Tong said he's not too bothered by Elsie Leung's response, as she does not speak for the central government.
I never underestimated the difficulties of convincing Beijing to promise to abolish all functional constituencies. However, we must realize that we are in a political difficulty in the sense that nobody can see any way out of the present deadlock.
Tong stressed the key is to persuade the majority of the Pan-Democratic camp. But he warned the administration not to be so naive as to think the city won't face a governance crisis even if it convinces 3 or 4 opposition lawmakers to change their minds. The government requires 2/3 of LegCo to pass its reform package, which means it needs at least 4 out of the 27 Pan-Democrats to back the final blueprint. Independent lawmaker Charles Mok is considered as one of the moderate members who may switch sides at the last minute after saying yesterday that he supports Tong's proposal. But he clarified over the airwaves this morning that he may consider Tong's proposal, but the chances of Beijing accepting it are extremely low. Mok reiterated that he will not endorse a reform package set under Beijing's restrictive framework, but he's willing to return to talks on the matter.
The government has pulled a 5th item off the Finance Committee's agenda to speed up the approval of funds for its long-delayed Innovation and Technology Bureau, or ITB.
We're prepared to answer questions raised by members of the Finance Committee. We're prepared to listen to views and comments of members of the Finance Committee, but we do not need, and Hong Kong does not need, filibustering. And filibustering is being mounted by a handful of opposition members for the purpose of opposing the government. And they should be held accountable. They should be held accountable to explain to the public why the ITB should not be formed from the finance point of view.
The Finance Committee is scheduled to hold an extra session tomorrow afternoon to discuss the issue. The latest item to be scrapped is a funding application for the fisheries sector. Pan-Democrats who are against setting up the new bureau describe Leung's move as authoritarian. The head of the Monetary Authority has warned potential home buyers to watch out for the risks involved, including a possible interest rate hike this year.
Norman Chan said additional measures may be rolled out if necessary to maintain the stability of the local banking system. Hong Kong's de facto central banker told lawmakers on the Financial Affairs panel this morning that property transactions have been rising since the second quarter of last year. On average, there have been 5,900 sales every month, with a quarter being new flats. While the number of deals is lower than in 2011 and 2012, there are signs that prices are shooting up. Monetary Authority Chief Executive Norman Chan warned that if U.S. interest rates go up, local rates will follow, as the Hong Kong dollar is pegged to the greenback.
Be very careful that in borrowing from banks for the mortgage loans, you must make sure that the current very low interest rates will not last forever. So you have to make sure that you have enough financial resources or capability to repay the mortgage loans if and when interest rates in Hong Kong go back to the more normal levels.
Chan said there's a need to keep a close eye on the potentially overheating property market to avoid hurting other sectors.
If necessary, we will implement additional macroprudential measures to protect the stability of the banking system.
Despite government efforts to curb soaring prices, housing remains unaffordable for many. ATV has struck a deal with a dozen former employees who were suing the company for severance pay and unpaid wages.
The company is hoping to pay the rest of December's salaries this week to 20% of staff who are still waiting for their money. ATV's Arthur Urquiola reports.
7 ATV staff were at the labor tribunal in Yau Ma Tei this morning to claim the wages owed to them. They're among some 88 employees who took an option under labor laws to declare that their contracts were effectively terminated at the end of last month, when they were not paid their November salaries. Members of the Kowloon Trades Union were outside the venue to show their support for the 12 staff whose cases were being heard today. Out-of-court settlements had already been reached before the hearing with 4 staff to compensate them according to their basic salaries before the end of next week. The station agreed to settle the payments for the other 8 today, including those who were absent, by the 15th of February as well. But some, like former ATV reporter Candy Lee, initially did not agree to the terms, since payments such as anchoring fees were not included in the basic salary calculations. She's agreed to a settlement and is hoping not to have to resort to asking for the company to be liquidated.
No, actually, I'm not confident that the company can pay the money. But if the company cannot pay the money before the deadline, I can use some rules to make him to pay. It's not only the matter of one people. It will affect about 700 people. The staff will lose their job immediately. So I don't want to use this method.
ATV Executive Director Ip Ka Po is hoping to settle the bill within this week, with 20% of staff in the higher pay bracket who are still waiting for their December salaries.
We will pay some of them by today, and the remaining colleges, I hope that we can pay all of them by the end of this week.
In a separate development today, the Communications Authority confirmed its decision to impose 2 fines on ATV of $100,000 each for unpaid license fees. The authority has now put ATV on notice to pay the outstanding amount by the 18th of March or face more serious sanctions, such as its license being revoked. Arthur Urquiola, ATV News.
Education authorities have confirmed that a local university selling cheap degrees online is a fake.
Sue Wen University of Hong Kong was even featured as a birthplace of excellence by China's state media last year. ATV's Winner Wang reports.
Ever heard of Sue Wen University of Hong Kong? Neither have we. But according to its website, which has now become inaccessible, you can get a diploma from there for as little as $125, while a bachelor's degree costs $1,250. For real local universities, a bachelor's degree tends to cost slightly over $40,000 per year, while international students need to fork out up to $265,000 annually. Sue Wen University lists its contact address as Lockhart Road in Wan Chai, and 2 photos from the website purport to show its modern campus. But a closer look reveals their photoshopped images of Harbor City's entrance from Canton Road and the IFC Mall in Central. On the front page banner, there's also an image of Chinese University Vice Chancellor Joseph Song sitting with a group of students and staff. The photo was pulled from Chinese University's website. The university has since denied any link with Su Wen, and it's reserving the right to take legal action against the imposters. The website also features a photo of former Chief Executive Donald Tsang and Basic Law Committee Vice Chairwoman Elsie Leung, apparently at a meeting of the Hong Kong Higher Education Alliance, which does not exist. The Education Bureau has clarified that Su Wen is not a registered school. But the bizarreness doesn't stop there. Up until this morning, students could apparently buy a Su Wen University certificate from China's online marketplace Taobao for anywhere between 100 and 1,000 yuan. Type Su Wen University in China's most popular search engine Baidu.com and you'll get a profile of the university. Baidu's map also lists Su Wen headquarters as Lucky Plaza on Lockhart Road. China's official Xinhua news agency today published an article about the fake university being exposed. But less than a year ago, Xinhua ran a profile piece titled Su Wen University of Hong Kong, a birthplace for excellence. When ATV called the number listed on Su Wen's website, a woman claiming to be from a company offering secretarial services denied any link with the fake university. We're also trying to get in touch with Su Wen because they've been using our number, she said. Winna Wong, ETV News.
Almost 90% of mainland cities failed to meet air quality standards last year, raising fears in a country where pollution kills more than 1 million people each year.
Although only 8 cities passed the test, environmental officials say it was a big improvement from 2013. Here's Arthur Akiola.
Shenzhen, just across the Hong Kong border, is one of the enviable 8 when it comes to pollution. The bustling commercial hub, along with fellow Pearl River Delta cities Zhuhai and Huizhou, is one of only a handful of mainland cities that met air quality standards last year. Altogether, just 8 of the 74 cities monitored by the Environment Ministry passed the test. But the ministry sees this as a major gain in the war on pollution, as only 3 cities, including the Tibetan capital Lhasa, qualified for the clean list in 2013. With fog shrouding large areas of the capital, Beijing, in recent months, it wasn't a surprise when the heavily industrial province of Hebei, surrounding the capital, was declared the most polluted region. Hebei had 7 of the 10 worst-performing cities, including Baoding, which has the dubious distinction of having the filthiest air in the country. The average PM 2.5 reading of tiny noxious particulates found in the air was 83 micrograms per cubic meter in the Hebei-Beijing-Tianjin region. China is aiming for 35 micrograms per cubic meter, but does not expect to achieve that level for 15 more years. Efforts are already being made to slash carbon monoxide and ozone emissions by shutting down heavy polluting factories, reducing the reliance on coal, and cutting down on traffic. But with pollution blamed for about 1.2 million deaths a year, the fight for cleaner air is expected to intensify. Arthur Akiola, ATV News.
China has executed 2 cult members who beat a woman to death in a McDonald's outlet after she spurned their recruitment effort.
But first, in a world wrap, an Australian journalist freed by Egypt has expressed concern about his 2 Al Jazeera colleagues left behind. Winna Wong reports.
Peter Gresta is tasting freedom after more than 400 days in prison. The Al Jazeera journalist and 2 Egyptian-born colleagues were arrested in 2013 and accused of collaborating with the banned Muslim Brotherhood following the overthrow of President Mohamed Morsi. They denied the charges but were sentenced to more than 7 years in jail. Gresta was freed under a presidential decree allowing for the deportation of foreign prisoners. Back in Brisbane, his jubilant family said the journalist was concerned about the pair left behind.
He's not going to forget his 2 other colleagues. There's no doubt that his excitement is tempered and restrained and will be until those guys are free.
Gresta stopped over in Cyprus on his way back to Australia, where beer and prawns await him, his family said. China has executed 2 cult members who beat a woman to death at a McDonald's restaurant in May last year. The pair, who belonged to the Church of Almighty God cult, were put to death in the eastern province of Shandong after the Supreme People's Court said the crime was extremely serious. The victim was called an evil spirit and bludgeoned with a chair after she refused to give her telephone number to the pair who were trying to recruit her. Security has been stepped up in Bangkok after 2 pipe bombs exploded in an upscale shopping mall in the Thai capital. 2 people were slightly injured in the blasts, the first since the military seized power in May last year. But tensions in the city have been rising since former Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra was banned from politics for 5 years last month in connection with a controversial rice buying scheme. Winna Wong, ATV News.
Time now for sports with Raymond Yeung.
So a fitting climax, the Super Bowl, Raymond.
Well, that's right. It all came down to an intercepted pass. The Seattle Seahawks were seconds away from victory, but the New England Patriots held on to clinch the Super Bowl in Phoenix. These New England Patriots fans looked like they had struck the lottery.